Earth is not a finished place. It is still moving, still breaking, still inventing itself. Across 6 continents, there are landscapes that feel less like destinations and more like interruptions. Places where familiar rules thin out, where scale overwhelms language, and where survival itself becomes a story. This journey moves through 25 of those places, not wonders designed to impress, but terrains that resist explanation, land that look accidental, impossible.
So if you want more journeys into the unforgiving, the beautiful, and the unknown, subscribe. Hit that button and join us as we explore the places that don't fit on postcards.
And yet, here they are. The first rises without warning from the ordered geometry of the Eastern Alps, a wall of stone so abrupt it appears unfinished. Scharberg Mountain does not slope into the sky. It confronts it, nearly 4,000 feet of exposed rock drops in a single clean fall. Below, 13 glacial lakes sit scattered like fragments of broken glass, each one carved by ice that no longer exists. The air up here feels thinner not only because of altitude, but because sound seems unwilling to linger. Weather systems cross this summit unhindered, making it a natural watchtower for storms still forming hundreds of miles away. This is uplift made visible, Earth still adjusting its spine. Leaving the mountains, the land flattens, but the pass grows heavier. On the edge of sea and sand stands Fort Morgan, 40 million bricks arranged into a pentagon, designed not for beauty, but for endurance. Salt winds grind against its walls. Cannon scars still mark the angles where ships once tested its strength. Built in the early 19th century, it was engineered to survive artillery and tides alike. Time has become its final adversary. Each crack is a record, each missing brick, a quiet surrender to erosion. History here does not sit behind glass. It erodes in place. Beyond the coast, the land empties. The rub, Al-Khali, does not invite entry. It absorbs it. This is the empty quarter, a desert so vast that direction becomes abstract. Dunes rise higher than city towers, some stretching 800 feet from base to crest. Wind reshapes them constantly, sliding entire hillsides forward year by year. And yet, beneath this dryness lies a contradiction. Fossilized elephants, ancient riverbeds. 10,000 years ago, this was grassland. Rain fell here. Life stayed. Climate shifted, and the land hardened. Now it serves as a warning written in sand. How quickly abundance can become absence. High in the Andes, stone answers back. Puma Punku sits fractured and unfinished, as if abandoned mid-thought. Massive blocks, some weigh more than 100 tons, are cut with angles so precise they align without mortar. Millimeter accuracy in an age without metal tools, at least none we understand. The stones are not decorative. They are architectural statements, locked together with an insistence on permanence. No written records explain how this was done. The site resists simple timelines. It forces a harder question. How much knowledge has already been lost? Far north, fresh water becomes something else entirely. Lake Baikal holds more water than all the Great Lakes combined. 20% of the world's unfrozen freshwater sits in this single rift, sinking deeper each year as the continental plates pull apart beneath it. In winter, the ice fractures into geometric seams, transparent enough to reveal darkness far below. Oxygen reaches depths that should be lifeless, supporting organisms found nowhere else on Earth. Beneath the ice, methane bubbles rise slowly, reminders that even stability here is temporary. Baikal does not freeze history. It preserves it. In Central America, the ground still breathes. Arenal volcano stands quiet now, but silence here is not absence. It is restraint. For decades after its violent eruption in the late 20th century, the mountain glowed red at night, rivers of lava tracing paths through rainforest. Today, heat still escapes through fractures. The soil around it is young, mineral-rich, quickly reclaimed by plants. Vines crawl over cooled rock. Forest returns faster than expected. Destruction becomes foundation. Renewal does not wait for permission. Norway's Sogne Fjord cuts inland like a blade. Carved by ice thicker than skyscrapers, it drops more than a kilometer below sea level. Fresh water floats above salt water here, creating layers that barely mix. Sound behaves differently. Echoes stretch unnaturally long. Bouncing between sheer walls polished smooth by glaciers that vanished 20,000 years ago. Boats move through reflections, so clear they erase the horizon. This is erosion turned monumental, absence turned architecture. Not all impossibilities are ancient. Some are ongoing. In the Pacific, volcanic islands rise where the crust is thinnest, built layer by layer from eruptions that never truly stop. Here, land is provisional. Maps expire quickly. Villages live with evacuation routes memorized. Fertile soil comes at the cost of certainty. Fire creates ground. Ground demands risk. Farther south, salt replaces water. Vast white plains stretch unbroken, blinding under direct sun. Beneath them lie lithium-rich brines, remnants of vanished lakes. What looks empty is now globally essential. Modern technology depends on these silent flats. Extraction brings roads, pumps, grids. The future drills into the past. In the Arctic, light itself becomes unstable. Auroras ripple across skies where compasses hesitate. Magnetic anomalies distort navigation. Ice shelves crack not with explosions, but with groans that carry for miles. Wildlife adapts or retreats. Humans build research stations on ground that may not remain frozen. Every measurement taken here is a race against change. Some places endure through isolation alone, villages clinging to cliffs, settlements reachable only by ice roads that melt in summer, populations counted in hundreds, not thousands, supplies flown in when weather allows. And yet, life continues. Children attend school, markets open, people marry, argue, plan futures. Geography presses hard, but it does not erase routine. History cuts corridors through these landscapes. Roads built by forced labor. Railways laid across permafrost. Canals carved through jungles at human cost that far exceeds their economic value. The land remembers even when monuments do not. Rusted rails, collapsing tunnels, silence where camps once stood. Progress leaves shadows. And then there are places that refuse categorization. Valleys where gravity seems selective. Lakes that disappear overnight, forests that grow sideways under constant wind, rocks that hum when struck. Each anomaly a reminder that our models are incomplete. As the route bends back towards cities, contrast sharpens. Glass towers rise near floodplains. Highways cross fault lines. Modernity presses forward, confident but exposed. Energy flows from distant deserts and frozen seas. The global system depends on places most people will never see. At the edge of continents, boundaries blur, where one plate dives beneath another, where oceans meet but do not mix, where maps draw lines the land ignores. These are margins in name only. They are centers of movement, creation, destruction. The final stretch leads into wilderness that resists access altogether. No roads, no signals, just terrain. Mountain passes that open for weeks each year. Rivers without bridges. Whether that decides the schedule. Here, scale resets perception. Human presence shrinks to footprint and breath. And yet, standing before these impossible places, the conclusion is not despair. It is clarity. The planet is not fragile because it is weak. It is fragile because it is complex. Every system connected. Every shift amplified. These landscapes are not spectacles. They are evidence of time, of force, of resilience that operates without sentiment. Earth does not need us to admire it, but it does record how we move across it. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Beyond the last fjord and volcano, the route continues into places that feel less photographed, less explained. Lands where the camera lingers because the mind needs time to adjust. The plateau arrives first, high, wide, and stripped of excess. Here, altitude flattens distance. Mountains do not rise, they hover. The ground is cracked by cold nights and burned by sun that feels closer than it should. Oxygen thins, thought slows. Animals move deliberately, conserving energy. Humans do the same. Settlements here are sparse, built low, pressed into the land as if asking permission to stay. The sky dominates everything. Clouds cast shadows the size of cities. Then the earth opens. A rift valley splits the surface cleanly, exposing layers normally hidden miles below. Walls of rock show time stacked in color. Reds, blacks, grays. Each band a chapter written by pressure and heat. In some places, steam leaks upward. Not dramatic, persistent. The ground reminds you it is only temporarily solid. Water returns, but not as relief. A river runs backward against expectation, pulled by tide stronger than its own current. Twice a day, the flow reverses. Boats wait. Fish adapt. Villages time their movement to the rhythm of the moon. Geography here is not fixed. It negotiates. Far inland, a forest grows where it should not exist. Trees rise from ground that floods seasonally, roots braided above water like scaffolding. When rains arrive, the forest becomes a lake. Canoes pass between trunks. When water retreats, fish remain stranded in shallow pools, feeding birds that arrive precisely on schedule. This is choreography without a director. Timing refined over centuries. Stone cities appear next, carved directly from cliffs. No mortar, no separation between architecture and geology. Doorways emerge from rock faces. Staircases descend into shadow. These places were not built so much as revealed. Chisel marks still visible. The silence inside is heavier than outside, as if sound respects the effort it took to create space here. Desert returns in another form. Not sand, but salt and wind-polished rock. Nothing tall survives. Everything hugs the ground. Even sound feels exposed. At night, temperature drops sharply. Stars crowd the sky, unfiltered by moisture or light. Constellations look closer, almost crowded. Navigation here once relied entirely on them. A mistake could mean days lost, or never found. On a distant coast, waves strike columns of basalt arranged with impossible regularity. Hexagons stacked like machinery parts. The result of cooling lava, yes, but standing here, explanation feels insufficient. The formations extend into the sea, disappearing beneath waves that seem to recognize their shape. Nature repeating itself with industrial precision. Ice returns again, but this time it moves. A glacier advances steadily, audible even from miles away. Cracks echo like distant thunder. The ice carries debris, rocks scraped from mountains, ground into sand. This is erosion, on a schedule measured in centuries. Villages nearby track its progress carefully. Too fast and roads vanish. Too slow and water supply changes. Stability here is dynamic. Further south, grasslands stretch uninterrupted. No fences, no trees. Wind shapes everything. Herds move like weather systems, driven by instinct older than borders. Predators follow at a distance. Humans here learn to read the land the way others read maps. By smell, by sound, by subtle shifts in grass color. Knowledge passed orally, precise, unwritten. Then comes the anomaly, a lake that appears overnight after rare storms, then vanishes just as quickly. Satellites struggle to catch it in time. For weeks, birds arrive by the thousands, nesting, feeding, multiplying. Then the water sinks back into the ground, leaving cracked earth in silence. Life erupts then retreats, a reminder that abundance can be temporary and still meaningful. The route bends toward spirituality, not monuments, but landscapes that demand reverence without instruction. A mountain no one climbs out of respect. A cave whose acoustics distort chanting into something unrecognizable. A river considered alive, given offerings rather than dams. Belief here is not decorative. It is adaptive, a way to coexist with forces that cannot be controlled. Industry intrudes quietly. An oil field stretches across tundra, pipes elevated to allow animals to pass beneath. Machinery hums day and night. Lights burn through polar darkness. Workers rotate in and out, living temporarily in a place that will never feel owned. Extraction here is careful, expensive, and incomplete. Even technology concedes limits. Beyond the infrastructure, wilderness resumes instantly. No transition. One step past a road, and there is nothing managed. Tracks disappear. Sound changes. The land reclaims attention. Survival depends on preparation, not confidence. A mountain road threads through this emptiness. Narrow, unforgiving. Switchbacks carved into slopes that fall away without warning. Weather can close it in minutes. Yet it remains open just long enough each year to connect isolated communities. The journey is as important as the destination. Every driver knows this road's moods. At the end of that road lies a valley that seems misplaced. Green where everything else is stone. Waterfalls feeding terraces cut by hand centuries ago. Agriculture practiced with precision born of necessity. No excess, no waste. The system sustains itself quietly. Outsiders see beauty. Locals see balance. Ancient towns follow. Streets too narrow for vehicles. Buildings leaning inward, supporting each other. Stone worn smooth by generations of footsteps. Modern life fits awkwardly here, adapted rather than imposed. Wires run discreetly. Technology hums softly. History is not preserved. It is inhabited. The modern city arrives abruptly. Glass, steel, speed. Yet even here, geography asserts itself. Flood barriers line rivers. Earthquake dampers sway unseen inside towers. Urban design responds to invisible threats mapped carefully beneath streets. Progress is built on awareness of risk. At the boundary between continents, the land narrows. A strait funnels currents from two oceans. Tides collide. Shipping lanes converge. This is a choke point for global movement. Control here has shaped empires. The water does not care. It flows regardless. And finally, the far edge. A coastline battered by uninterrupted wind. No shelter. No harbor. Just rock meeting sea with constant force. Few structures survive long. Those that do are reinforced, low, resilient. People here speak sparingly. Weather decides plans. Departure times are suggestions. Standing at this edge, the pattern becomes clear. Impossible places are not defined by beauty alone. They are defined by pressure, geological, climatic, historical. They exist where forces overlap, where balance is temporary, where certainty is rare. These lands shock not because they're strange, but because they are honest. They show the planet without moderation. No smoothing, no compromise. And yet, life persists, adapts, learns. The journey ends not with a conclusion, but with distance, a wide pullback. The earth turning steadily, carrying deserts, glaciers, cities, and silent valleys together through space. Unfinished, unrepeatable. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Past the edges already traced, the route presses into places that feel less like destinations and more like consequences. The land narrows into a corridor where cliffs lean inward, compressing the sky into a thin ribbon of light. This is a passage shaped by water that no longer flows. The river that carved it vanished thousands of years ago, rerouted underground after a tectonic shift. What remains is a scar, smooth walls, undercut shelves, polished stone where currents once accelerated. Wind now occupies the space water abandoned. whistling through bends with sound that feels rehearsed. Travelers move quietly here, instinctively. The scale discourages noise. Beyond the corridor, the ground fractures into plateaus stacked like misaligned pages. Each level holds a different climate. Snow persists on one shelf, while grass grows freely just below. Clouds stall against invisible boundaries, dropping rain on one elevation and passing dry over the next. Farming adapts vertically. Crops change every few hundred feet. Knowledge here is measured in gradients, not calendars. Further on, the earth darkens. A plane of volcanic glass stretches outward, sharp enough to slice boots and tires alike. Obsidian reflects the sky in broken fragments, turning clouds into scattered patterns underfoot. This ground was once molten, flowing faster than a person could run. Cooling trapped motion mid-gesture. Nothing grows easily here. What has survived stays small, resilient, efficient. Life edits itself down to essentials. Then comes Watergan, but held unnaturally still. A lake without outlet, fed by snowmelt and rain, losing water only through evaporation. Minerals accumulate. The color shifts with seasons, from pale turquoise to deep rust. Birds arrive in synchronized waves, exploiting brief windows of abundance. When conditions change, they leave without hesitation. Permanence is not assumed here. A settlement clings to the lake's edge, buildings coated white by mineral dust. Metal corrodes quickly, would last longer. People adapt materials the way others adapt clothing. Everything is temporary, designed for replacement rather than preservation. Maintenance is constant. Survival is practical. The route bends into jungle so dense that distance collapses. A mile feels longer here than a mountain range elsewhere. Sound dominates vision. Insects, birds, rain, all layered, overlapping. Paths disappear overnight. Growth erases evidence quickly. Archaeological remains hide in plain sight, swallowed by roots and vines. Stone steps lead nowhere visible. Walls dissolve back into soil. The forest does not destroy history. It absorbs it. At the jungle's edge, a river widens suddenly, slowing as it approaches the sea. Sediment settles here, building new land grain by grain. Deltas shift yearly. Maps become suggestions. Villages rebuild slightly inland after floods, then move back as channels change. Architecture floats, pivots, adapts. Stability is fluid. Offshore, coral structures rise from darkness, built by organisms smaller than grains of rice. They construct vast frameworks without intention, yet with precision. Entire ecosystems depend on these fragile skeletons. Heat stresses them. Acid weakens them. Recovery, when it happens, is slow. These are cities built by patience, threatened by speed. Leaving the tropics, the route climbs into high desert where color drains away. Beige, gray, pale blue sky. Nothing interrupts the horizon. This emptiness magnifies movement. A single vehicle can be seen for hours. Dust plumes become landmarks. Time stretches. Thought wanders. The land does not distract. It confronts. Then, unexpectedly, water falls from the sky in curtains. A plateau edge drops abruptly, releasing a waterfall so wide it resists framing. Mist rises continuously, feeding a narrow band of rainforest clinging to rock. Rainbows appear and vanish within seconds. The sound is constant, low and heavy, like distant machinery. Power here is obvious and unapologetic. Downstream, the river calms. It spreads into floodplains where soil renews itself annually. Agriculture flourishes, but always with awareness. Flood markers line buildings. Height matters. Memory matters. The river has claimed lives before. It will again. Respect is built into routine. The route continues into stone labyrinths, eroded badlands where spires and ridges form accidental mazes. No straight lines. No reliable landmarks. Orientation depends on subtle cues. Shadow direction, wind exposure, rock texture. Getting lost is easy. Staying lost is dangerous. Rescue here is slow. Decisions carry weight. Night transforms these badlands completely. Temperature drops. Stars dominate. Silence becomes active, pressing inward. Every movement sounds amplified. Predators hunt with efficiency honed by scarcity. Humans retreat to light instinctively. Fire regains its ancient authority. Further on, the land softens into rolling hills marked by terraced agriculture abandoned long ago. Stone walls still trace slopes, holding soil in place though no one maintains them. Vegetation respects these boundaries centuries later. Human intervention persists even after humans leave. The land remembers structure. A coastal shelf follows, exposed at low tide and submerged hours later. Life here exists on a schedule dictated by the moon. Pools trap fish and crustaceans temporarily. Birds patrol methodically. Timing is everything. Miss the tide, and paths vanish beneath water. Knowledge here is lunar. Beyond the shelf, cliffs rise again, but these are layered with caves, some natural, some expanded by hand. Smoke stains mark ancient habitation. Tools found here suggest repeated occupation, abandonment, return. Cycles driven by climate shifts, resource availability, conflict. History here is episodic, not linear. The route presses into a basin surrounded by mountains that trap air. Pollution lingers. Heat intensifies. Weather stagnates. Modern industry struggles here, constrained by geography. Solutions require compromise. Emissions matter more when they cannot escape. The land enforces accountability. Leaving the basin, a high pass opens briefly each year. Snow walls line the road even in summer. Meltwater carves channels across asphalt. Travel windows are narrow. Miss them, and isolation becomes absolute. Communities plan lives around these openings. Births, supplies, festivals, all scheduled with weather in mind. On the far side, a plateau stretches toward the horizon, dotted with ancient burial mounds. No markers, just raised earth. Respect expressed through avoidance rather than signage. Development routes curve around them. The dead still shape movement. The final stretch leads to a shoreline where icebergs drift past in slow procession, calved from distant glaciers. They rotate silently, melting unevenly. Fresh water meets salt water. Temperature gradients create fog that appears and disappears without warning. Navigation here relies on sound as much as sight. Standing at this coast, it becomes clear that impossibility is relative. What shocks is not that these places exist, but that life has learned to persist within them. Every landscape encountered is a negotiation between force and adaptation, between what the earth demands and what living things can offer in response. The journey does not resolve into comfort. It widens perspective. It replaces certainty with awareness. The planet is not a backdrop. It is an active participant. And every impossible place is an invitation, not to conquer, but to understand how small adjustments allow survival where none seems likely. The camera pulls back once more. Clouds drift, currents move, plates shift beneath oceans. Quietly, constantly, the story continues without us. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Beyond the last shoreline, the route slips into places that feel deliberately overlooked, lands that exist outside common narratives, where nothing announces itself and yet everything matters. The terrain hardens into a stone desert where the ground rings faintly underfoot. Not hollow, but resonant. Thin crust over ancient bedrock. Every step sends vibration through layers formed long before surface life existed. There are no signs here. No trails. Just exposure. The sky feels larger because nothing interrupts it. Even clouds seem hesitant to linger. Farther in, the desert fractures into wind-carved corridors. Sandstone walls twist and narrow, their surfaces etched with ripples frozen mid-motion. The wind still sculpts them, grain by grain, polishing edges until they look intentional. Sound funnels unpredictably. A voice spoken softly can carry for hundreds of feet, then vanish entirely around a bend. Communication becomes uncertain. Silence feels safer. Beyond the stone, the land dips suddenly into a basin where heat collects. Daytime temperatures climb sharply, pressing down like weight. The air shimmers. Movement slows. At night, the heat releases reluctantly, radiating upward from rock. Survival here depends on restraint. Travel happens early or not at all. Water is cached, measured, protected. Excess effort is punished. In the center of the basin lies a salt-encrusted flat, cracked into polygons by evaporation. The patterns repeat endlessly, precise and indifferent. From above, they resemble circuitry. From ground level, they distort distance, making the horizon appear closer than it is. Many have misjudged the walk. Few repeat the mistake. Leaving the basin requires climbing through a choke point where erosion has undercut cliffs, leaving overhangs suspended improbably. Rockfall is constant but unpredictable. The safest path changes yearly. Locals read the debris like language. Fresh fractures, dust patterns, silence where there should be sound. Knowledge replaces signage. On the other side, a plateau opens into rolling step, dotted with standing stones. No one knows exactly who placed them or why. They align roughly with celestial events, but not precisely enough to be explained fully. Weathered, tilted, patient. Grazing animals avoid them instinctively, as if taught by generations before. Human presence here feels temporary by comparison. The route continues into wetlands where ground and water argue constantly. Marsh grasses conceal channels deep enough to swallow vehicles. The surface lies. Every step is a question. Locals move lightly, testing with poles, reading plant density and color. Here, stillness is safer than speed. Panic sinks you faster. At the wetland's edge, water gathers into a slow-moving river stained dark by organic matter. It reflects nothing. Boats glide silently, engines muted. Sound travels poorly here. Predators rely on vibration instead. Fishing techniques favor patience over force. Nets are set and left, checked hours later. Efficiency is quiet. Downstream, the river meets stone again, accelerating through a narrow gorge. Water pressure increases, carving potholes into bedrock, some large enough to hold entire trees. The roar is constant. No word survive it. Crossing points are rare and memorized. A misstep here is final. Beyond the gorge, land rises gradually into forest that feels deliberately sparse. Trees stand far apart, their canopies never touching. Light reaches the ground easily, encouraging low growth rather than competition. Fire moves through this landscape regularly, clearing excess, renewing soil. Here, destruction is maintenance. Without it, the system fails. The route bends into highlands where clouds sit low and refuse to lift. Visibility collapses. Direction becomes uncertain. Compass readings fluctuate slightly due to mineral deposits beneath the surface. Travelers rely on slope, wind direction, even bird behavior. Modern tools assist, but tradition still fills gaps technology cannot. A ridgeline breaks the cloud cover briefly, revealing a lake suspended improbably at elevation. No visible inflow, no visible outflow. Its water level remains stable year-round, fed by subterranean channels. The surface is unnaturally calm, absorbing sound. Even wind seems to pause over it. This is not a place for recreation. People linger quietly, then move on. Descending from the highlands, the land warms and opens into agricultural terraces still actively maintained. Stone walls curve with the contours of hills, preventing erosion, trapping moisture. Crops change subtly with elevation. Nothing wasted, nothing excessive. The system has endured because it adapts without expanding. Further along, the terrain collapses into sinkholes, some shallow, some swallowing entire trees. Limestone dissolves slowly under persistent rainfall, undermining the surface without warning. Roads divert often. Construction here requires constant reassessment. Stability is provisional. The route skirts a plain where wind never fully stops. Turbines rise in careful rows, extracting energy from relentless motion. Their presence feels appropriate, almost inevitable. Technology aligns briefly with geography rather than resisting it. Even so, maintenance crews work constantly. Nature tolerates no neglect. Beyond the turbines, the land darkens into peatlands. Ground compresses underweight, releasing the scent of ancient vegetation. Carbon locked away for millennia sits inches below the surface. disturb it and it escapes. Fire here smolders underground, invisible, impossible to extinguish completely. The land burns quietly. A sudden change in elevation leads to cliffs riddled with nesting sites. Birds dominate this space, thousands at once, filling the air with motion and sound. The ground below is white with mineral residue. Access is dangerous, limited to narrow ledges. Humans are visitors here, tolerated briefly. The route continues inland to a city built around a fault line. Streets bend subtly where ground has shifted over decades. Buildings incorporate joints designed to flex. Earthquakes are not feared so much as anticipated. Drills are routine. Awareness replaces panic. Leaving the city, the road narrows into a tunnel carved through solid rock. Exiting it feels like passing through a membrane. On the far side lies a valley perpetually in shadow due to steep walls and low sun angle. Ice persists year-round in pockets. Moss dominates. Time moves differently here. Growth is slow, decay slower. Further still, the land rises to a final plateau, wind-swept and bare. Nothing tall survives. Even structures crouch. This is a place of passage, not settlement. People cross it to reach elsewhere, rarely staying. Stories collect here briefly, then move on. At the plateau's edge, the land falls away into ocean once more. Cliffs drop straight into water, deep enough to swallow light. Waves strike without rhythm, driven by distant storms. There is no safe harbor. Ships pass far offshore. This coast is not meant for arrival. Standing here, at yet another ending that refuses closure, the pattern sharpens again. Impossible places are not anomalies. They are reminders. They show where assumptions fail, where control is limited, where adaptation matters more than dominance. The journey has crossed extremes without exhausting them. There will always be more. Lands unseen, forces misunderstood, systems still unfolding. The earth remains unfinished, and that may be its most impossible quality of all. Thanks for watching. See you soon. Beyond even those margins, the route slips into territories that feel less mapped and more inferred. Places known not by coordinates, but by consequence. The land here is uneven in a way that resists prediction. Hills rise without pattern, then collapse into shallow depressions that collect fog like water. Morning visibility shrinks to a few dozen feet. Sound arrives late, distorted. Footsteps echo strangely, as if following a different path in the body that made them. Orientation becomes instinctual. People move by feel rather than sight. Then the fog lifts abruptly. revealing a plain scattered with boulders far too large to belong here. Each one rests alone, separated by hundreds of feet of bare ground. No cliffs nearby, no obvious source. They were carried by ice long gone, deposited gently as glaciers melted and retreated. These stones traveled farther than most people ever will. Now they sit immobile, patient, witnesses without context. The route cuts across this plain toward a river that has carved itself deep into soft earth, exposing layers that read like a timeline, dark bands of ancient soil, pale streaks of ash from eruptions hundreds of miles away, a single, thin line of charcoal marking a fire that burned briefly and then vanished from record. The river continues to cut downward, revealing more than it erases. Crossing it requires a suspension bridge that sways under weight, cables humming faintly in the wind. The bridge is maintained constantly, not because it is weak, but because the environment demands attention. Neglect is noticed quickly here. The land does not tolerate assumption. On the far side, the ground rises into a forest where trees grow twisted, shaped by decades of uneven snow load and persistent wind. None stand straight, yet they endure. Their roots grip shallow soil spread thin over rock. Growth is slow, deliberate. Rings are tight, packed close together. Age hides in density rather than height. Beyond the forest, the land opens into alpine meadows that bloom briefly each year, then disappear beneath snow. Color erupts suddenly, purples, yellows, whites, then retreats just as fast. Insects synchronize their lives to this window. Miss it, and reproduction fails. Precision here is survival. The route climbs higher still, reaching a ridge where the wind never rests. It scours the ground clean, leaving only stone and lichen. Clouds race past at eye level. Standing upright feels optional. Balance becomes negotiation. This is not a place for lingering. The body understands this immediately. Descending from a ridge, the landscape shifts again, softening into rolling hills marked by shallow caves formed from porous rock. Some are barely visible, others large enough to shelter entire groups. Evidence of repeated use appears subtly. Darkened ceilings, smooth floors, faint carvings that mark seasons rather than ownership. Shelter here is temporary by design. Farther on, the land drops into a basin where cold air pools, creating a microclimate entirely out of sync with surrounding terrain. Frost persists long after spring arrives elsewhere. Crops are planted later, harvested earlier. Time feels compressed. Planning requires caution. Optimism is tempered by experience. The basin drains into a river that disappears underground. re-emerging miles away through a spring powerful enough to carve its own canyon. The water arrives cold, clear, and forceful, as if impatient after confinement. The ground trembles slightly near the outlet. The earth exhales. Following the water leads into a region of layered cliffs, each band representing a different era of deposition. Some crumble easily, others resist entirely. Trails wind carefully, avoiding collapse zones marked by fresh debris. The land teaches where to walk, if one pays attention. Then comes a stretch of land that feels unfinished. Mud flats that never fully dry, yet never flood completely. Footprints linger for days, then vanish without warning. Vehicles risk becoming permanent features. Movement here is slow and considered. Weight matters. Beyond the flats, the terrain firms into gravel plains shaped by ancient floods. Channels cut through them abruptly, dry most of the year, violent during storms. Flash floods reshape everything in hours. What was safe yesterday may not exist tomorrow. Memory is unreliable here. The route bends toward a coastline battered not by waves, but by wind. Sand moves inland constantly, swallowing fences, roads, even buildings. Entire villages have relocated multiple times, dismantled and rebuilt farther back from the advancing dunes. Retreat is not failure, it is adaptation. Further inland, a plateau rises abruptly, its edges sheer and unbroken. The ascent follows a narrow path carved by generations of passage. One misstep carries consequence. At the top, the land flattens into grassland where animals migrate in long arcs, following routes etched into memory rather than terrain. These paths persist even when obstacles appear. Detours are temporary. Tradition endures. The route intersects with a dry lakebed marked by concentric rings of mineral deposits, each one recording a different water level. From above, it resembles a fingerprint. From the ground, it feels ceremonial. People cross it quietly, unconsciously lowering voices. Something about exposed history commands restraint. Beyond the lakebed, volcanic cones rise from the plain, small but numerous. Each one marks an eruption, brief but violent. Some are recent enough to retain sharp edges. Others are softened, eroded into gentle hills. Time reveals itself through shape. The land darkens again into basalt flows that crack into geometric patterns as they cool. Columns form naturally, standing like ruins of civilization that never existed. Walking among them feels like trespassing in an abandoned city. Scale confuses perception. Everything feels simultaneously ancient and fresh. Further on, the route enters a valley where sound behaves strangely. Voices carry far but lose clarity. Footsteps echo unevenly. The effect comes from curved rock walls that reflect sound selectively. Communication adapts. Gestures replace words. Silence becomes useful. The valley narrows, then opens suddenly into a broad expanse of wetlands fed by mountain runoff. Water glints everywhere. Channels shift constantly. Plants grow aggressively, reclaiming space overnight. Human paths require maintenance or disappear. Effort here is continuous. At the wetland's edge, the ground rises gently into farmland sustained by careful water management. Channels guide flow precisely, distributing resources evenly. Flood and drought are both anticipated. This landscape works because it respects variability rather than fighting it. The route leaves cultivation behind, climbing into uplands where soil thins again. Vegetation shrinks. Exposure increases. Weather shifts quickly. Clouds form and dissolve without warning. Forecasts are suggestions at best. A final ridge marks another threshold. Beyond it, the land falls toward a horizon blurred by distance and haze. Nothing stands out. Nothing signals importance. And yet, this emptiness carries weight. It is the sum of everything passed through. All forces balance briefly here. Standing at this point, the idea of impossible feels less about extremity and more about humility. These places do not shock because they're loud. They shock because they persist without explanation or permission. They remind us that the earth is not arranged for convenience. It is arranged by process, by time, by pressure applied repeatedly until form emerges. The journey does not end with answers. It ends with awareness of scale, of fragility, of resilience that operates without drama. The camera pulls back once more. The land recedes into pattern. Rivers thread valleys. Winds trace invisible paths. Continents drift, and the impossible places remain, unchanged by observation, waiting quietly for the next set of footsteps to remind them, briefly, that they have been seen. Thanks for watching. See you soon.